one more thing that is important for you youngsters to know about working within Illustrator is what it's to do when you're all done. There's a couple different ways you can save an Illustrator file. So say I was just working and I want to save my progress so I don't lose all my work. You should be doing that every 15 minutes. It's a good habit. I'm going to have to go to save as. You could just go to save. But if I want a working copy of my file, the one that has all of these lovely layers and objects and groups and ability to change everything, I want to save it as an AI file or an Adobe Illustrator file. So when this box comes up, you want this little extension right here. You can change that extension when you're all ready to turn in your object. So I actually don't want to save that there. I want to save it on my desktop. That way I know where to look for it. Folders are your friends, guys. Stay organized. And my format is here. If I was all done with it, I would consider changing the format, but I'm not. So I've got my working file, and I'm going to call it mushrooms working because it's a file I can change and go back and work on. They are not actually earning any sort of wage. Mushrooms have terrible unions. Moving on. So I can save that. This box pops up. Don't worry about any of the settings in there. Just hit OK. And now if I look on my desktop, there's my mushrooms. It even has a lovely little grid around it to show me that it's an AI file. So going back into AI, say I am finished with my lovely mushrooms and I would like to move on with my life and my mushrooms. So what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to mess with save. I'm going to go down to export. I'm going to export as, and I have two options. I can choose a PNG, which preserves transparency. We'll get into that a little bit more. You're not going to be working with transparency a whole ton with this one, but something you keep in mind. What I want is a JPEG. A JPEG is the most common file form that you will find on the interwebs. It's I can't remember what it stands for. Not important. You'll learn that with Mr. Sicily. Anyway, it compresses all of these layers. I'll show you the difference in just a second between the AI and the JPEG. So I'm going to get rid of the working. Mushrooms done, man. And I'm going to hit export. This pops up. Again, you don't necessarily need to worry about these settings, but I'm going to explain them real quick. The color mode depends on what you're exporting it for. If I was going to print my beloved mushrooms, RGB stands for red, green, blue. Your computers are technically a box full of light. When you are measuring colors with light, you use the spectrum of red, green, and blue light. However, if you are printing, if you opened up the giant printer in my classroom right now, first, I would be very mad because that's expensive. But second, you would see that it has several different canisters of ink. It has a cyan one, C for cyan. It has a magenta one, and it has a yellow one. I think K stands for black. Unsure, not sure why. But if I changed my color mode to that, that would be for printing this image. Just a fun fact here. So, getting back to the topic at hand, I'm going to hit OK. That saves my little mushit room. Now I have two files on my desk, my working one and my flattened JPEG. I'm actually going to open the JPEG so you can see the difference between them. If I control right click on that and go to open with Adobe Illustrator, now I have two little tabs here. Those are my puffer fish. Bye, puffers. Now I have two tabs here. Watch what happens when I click on the mushroom. In working, it selects all those objects. They all have our layers and everything. If I come over to mushrooms done, I just have one layer, one image. If I click on the mushroom, it selects the whole thing. So all those layers have been squished together and are no longer functioning as separate objects. Important things to remember when you go to save and when you go to turn in. When I ask you to turn something into your Google folder, unless I specifically say to you, I want this as an AI file, that means I'm probably going to poke around in your layers and see what you did there. I usually will not ask for that. Why? Because AI files are so much larger than a JPEG file because they contain all of this information here about, oh, this is a separate rectangle. This is on this path. This is on this layer. Google Drive doesn't like really big files, it likes small files. So when you go to turn something in, for the most part, excepting one or two cases where I'm like, hey, I want to be able to look inside what you did, you're going to be turning things in as a JPEG. Cool? Cool.